intro video was the logo for the Human Perspective, which has orange and purple concentric circles around a photo of Judy Human. This fades into a video with a purple border, with Chelsie Hill in one frame and Judy Human in another. Chelsie is a white woman with long brown and blonde hair wearing a light pink top. Judy is a white woman with short brown hair wearing red glasses and a purple and pink print top.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Human Perspective. We're going to be speaking with a woman that I have gotten to know over the last number of years, more years actually than I realized. I think I first met you, Chelsie, when you were on Push Girls. And that was in what, 2012?
Yeah, 2012.
So why don't you tell us briefly what Push Girls was?
Yeah, so Push Girls was a reality show, a docu-based series about 5 of us and how we live our lives as women with disabilities. We all had different levels of spinal cord injuries, and we just showed how we lived our life as traveling, dating, finding friends, career. And I was the young one that was newly injured and kind of was thrown into this injury and didn't really know what to expect. So it was about the 4 main girls, and then there was me, the young one.
So the reason I wanted to invite Chelsie to do one of our programs is because she is, as you will see, and maybe already know, a really dynamic, outgoing person. I loved Push Girls, and if you can get it, you should watch it because it was a great program. But what I loved about Chelsie was she was a relatively newly disabled woman. And here she was, a high school student. And I thought, the program overall was really good. And then when they brought you in as a younger person, and nobody on the program was old. I mean, they were in their 20s and 30s. But nonetheless, there was a good number of years difference between the oldest person and you. And so to me, it also had a greater relevance to a broader audience.
Yeah. And also too, I think what was cool about it is there was, as in like numbers of years, we were all injured, like one person was injured for literally the amount of years I was alive. And so it was so cool to have that like different variations of the mindset. Like I was very like, I need to walk again. I need to. And like 2 of them, I remember Ati and Angela were like sitting back just going, oh, she's still in that. Like she's, like watching me process. Like I processed out loud on the show. And I think that was really cool just to be able to go back and have people who are also processing during that time be able to relate, because you don't just get injured or diagnosed or become disabled and you're perfectly okay. It's like you go through these different processes, and I was doing that on national television, which was kind of, I don't know, it's kind of crazy to think about now.
But as a viewer, and one who had my disability longer than anybody on the program, it was still, for me, a great example of what I would have loved to have had when I was younger. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the program itself really was, I think, great in general. It was good for non-disabled people to see another reality show, if you like those, focusing on disabled women, doing so many different things. But also, I think, learning about how people were processing as they were moving forward, and issues like the importance of moving on with your life and not spending your life looking at walking again. Mm-hmm. So like moving from there, now you then went on to create this organization called the Rollettes. So before you started doing that, when did you get involved in dancing? Did you do dancing before you had your disability?
Yeah, so I actually started dancing at a young age. I started dancing when I was 3, and then I started competing nationally and regionally when I was 5 years old.
What kind of dance?
I did hip hop, jazz, contemporary. I was more so a hip hop girl. Like that was, I like dabbled in ballet, but I was more so a hip hop girl, jazz, contemporary, lyrical. But I started at a really young age. And to be honest, that was like the one thing that I felt like I was really good at. I wasn't really into school, I'll be honest. Like school was really hard for me. But dance was something I could go and do a competition and I could win, and I felt like I made my family proud. So I grew up knowing my entire life that I wanted to be a dancer, and I wanted to move to Los Angeles and go on tour and be in music videos. Like that was I had a very clear dream of what I wanted to do. And so, becoming paralyzed,
How old were you?
I was 17. It was a month before my 18th birthday.
Mm-hmm.
So very young, very just naive to the world, and very like fresh and ready to like go to college. So I started, I was in Push Girls for the first season, and then second season is when I had this idea of getting other girls in Northern California together to just like dance and hang out. It was never a goal to like have a dance team and then have this big camp. That was never like the initial goal. And I remember I reached out to 6 other girls that were, all spinal cord injury. That's the only diagnosis I knew at the time. And they all flew into Monterey and stayed on my couch, stayed on the floor. Like, we went to Target and like raced down the aisles, and it just became this like get together reunion. And it wasn't called Rollettes. It was literally like walk and roll boot camp, or like, we had a nonprofit at the time. So it started out very just casual.
Were any of the other women dancers before they had acquired their disabilities?
No, none of them were. Mia, who was on the show too, she danced with Colors in Motion. And then Allie, she did like theater and stuff. So those are the only 2 that really kind of had like a background in dance, not like prior to their injury, but prior to like hanging out with us. So yeah, Allie was like one of the first girls that I reached out to. And then so 6 of us. Well, 7.
And so you mean Allie Stroker?
Yes, Allie Stroker.
How did you meet Allie?
So I met Allie at an adaptive surf event back in like maybe a year after I was paralyzed. And she always tells the story that she says, you had a backwards hat on, and I was just so intrigued. I wanted to meet you. And so she rolled up to me and we started talking. We literally hit it off. And she says that I was her first friend in a wheelchair, and she's been, in a wheelchair basically her whole life. And so we hit it off instantly, and we've been best friends ever since.
That's a great story. I actually didn't know that part of the story.
Yeah.
So your vision was to be a dancer, go to college, be a dancer. Once you acquired your disability, what were some of your beginning thoughts about your future?
There was a lot of unknown. I went through a lot of different feelings. My whole world was flipped upside down because I didn't know anybody with a disability, especially anybody that lived a life in a wheelchair. I was completely unaware. And so a lot of things that went through my mind, the first thing I asked the doctor was, will I be able to dance? That was the first thing I said when I got, tubes out of my mouth and I could speak. And he just looked at me and he said, I'm so sorry, no. And the second thing I asked him was, well, can I still have kids? And he goes, well, I was in pediatric ICU at the time. And he goes, well, you can talk to your family about that. So those are the 2 first questions I asked. I had no idea. I couldn't feel half my body. My goal after the hospital is I wanted to convince everyone else that I was still me. I looked different, but I was still me inside. And that was my main goal, really, with like, getting these girls together. I wanted to show my community that I'm not the only person that has, been disabled at this age. So for me, that was my biggest goal. Just starting out, just convincing everyone else that like I'm still me.
So what kinds of changes were going on with other people towards you that you felt you had to say, hey, this is still me?
It started out a lot with my friends. I was the type of person in high school that I was friends with everyone. I knew a lot. I knew everyone from different schools. I was a very social butterfly. And I started realizing that people wouldn't invite me to things. And I think it was more so hurtful because I still wanted to be who I was, but I had to convince them that I was still me. And so I saw a lot of people that would just not call me as much. They just, people that I would hang out with, I started to not hear from them. And, I had family members just kind of go, oh, I don't know if you can do this. And my dad was one of the only people really that was like, well, we don't know, but let's try. And so I had this kind of mixed emotions and mixed feedback from people. Of a lot of people kind of shied away from me because of the unknown, because they didn't know. Maybe they thought I was like more fragile. And then I had like my dad that was just the one that was like, I don't know, but let's go, let's push, let's go forward. You want to get into this car, let's try it. You want to drive, here's the keys, get your chair in the car. So I had this kind of mixed feedback.
Mm-hmm. Did push girls, like, to me, there's very much connection. You're newly disabled, you're an outgoing person, but now there are these changes going on. Push Girls is such like an outward movie. How did they learn about you? How did you audition?
So I didn't audition. So it's kind of crazy. The year I was paralyzed, I went to a fundraiser in LA, and that's when I saw Ati for the first time. And I saw her videos when I was still in the hospital. My dad came in and was like, look at this girl in a wheelchair dancing. And I was like, huh, interesting. Long story short, saw her, completely fangirled, and like started freaking out because I was like, oh my gosh, I saw her videos. Then she introduced me to all of the other girls. And like later that year, all the girls invited me down to meet with these producers. And I was like, okay, sure. So my dad and I drove down, had pizza here in LA. I was still living in Monterey. And long story short, I met with these two women who were the producers of this show that they were still pitching. And after a full, meal and chatting over dinner, I remember the producer of the production company just said, hey, like, you're a missing link. And I was like, to what? And she goes, you have no idea why you're here? And I said, no, I just thought we were like doing a meeting. I don't know. And I had no idea what it was about. And so they told me they were pitching a show. Long story short, they like really took me under their wing, honestly. And I think it was the biggest blessing I could have had as someone who was a young woman with a disability, just learning how to live a life again.
So how do you link that part of your life to the Rollettes?
Ooh, such a good question. I mean, I feel just in general, when you have a life-altering incident, when you find other people that are like you, it changes the game. Because this injury, this diagnosis, a disability in general can be so isolating when you first get into this like new world. I feel like I really got so much confidence so early on to my injury because of the girls. And I owe so much of that confidence and reminding myself who I am at my core to the girls. We talked about dating, we talked about family, we talked about how do I wear my heels? How do I feel like a girl again? Like, not only talking about it, but I got to see it. So for me, that feeling of being around other girls like me, I brought into this idea of like this dance team, like I craved it. I didn't feel different when I was around other people with disabilities. I felt normal. Whatever that is, I felt like I belonged. I didn't feel different.
Right. Yeah, and I very much understand that. It's like, so I'll use an example. I had the privilege of coming out for your 10th anniversary. And, in the beginning, I wasn't really sure. I'd done a program with you in 2020 virtually, but I didn't know anybody. Usually I go places and I know a lot of people, and really I knew virtually nobody. I knew you, but we'd never met. It was the first time that I'd met you. I knew Allie, and Allie loved you, so all those things were great. And Allie was coming, but then she couldn't come because she's also having a baby.
Yeah.
And so here I was, and a little kind of uncertain, but then when I got there, I was so happy because I hadn't been in a room with so many other disabled people in so long because of COVID.
Yeah.
And it's like just being and not having to worry about how people were looking at you. And I mean, we were all looking at each other because people had these wild outfits on and dancing, but it wasn't looking at us because we were the odd person out using a wheelchair. And for me, it was like amazing. So, did you ever envision the Rollettes becoming what it is today?
So in 2012, after I got the first group of 7 of us together, I remember saying to them, like, I have this idea, like, how cool would it be to have a ballroom full of girls dancing? And why I said that is I grew up in the competitive dance industry where you'd go to conventions and competitions, and there's ballrooms full of just people dancing and competing and taking classes. And there was nothing like that for us. So I didn't really know where to go. There was, that was my normal, and then my normal was flipped upside down. So that's kind of when it was sparked. But each year after that, it just became a reunion, and we'd invite maybe like 1 more girl or 2 more girls or 3 more girls, and it just kind of got bigger after that, just by like small increments. And I feel like the small increments helped grow it, because we learned so much. Like, I remember doing car washes on the side of the road, like, free car wash, donate what you can, so we could get like lunch that day, like, so it's grown so much. And I think every year that it's grown, I've gotten a little bit more confident in where I can see it going. And we have so many more things we want to do.
So talk a little bit more about some of the things you want to do.
I feel like, honestly, the sky's the limit. I feel like this is such an untapped niche. No one's ever done anything like this. And it's crazy to say that, like, having a bunch of women together dancing and, panels and stuff like that. I want Rollettes Experience one day to be the #1 place for women with disabilities to come to. I would love to have a convention center, and there's like 5 different stages, and we have fashion shows, we have makeup seminars, we have dance classes, and maybe like a Zumba or something, and adaptive sports, and it just be the place for people. And maybe one day it's not just women. I don't know. I don't know. I have like big hopes and dreams for it. And I think every year we just learn what works and what doesn't. And I think that's the best way to grow, is just to keep learning.
One of the reasons why I really loved being there was the fact that there were so many women, and the discussions were just so broad. So, people came to dance, and you had an advocacy workshop and various other things, but then there were all these minutes where people were mingling. I mean, I spoke to so many people and wanted to know, like, why had you come, and what have you done with this before? And for me, it was interesting just to see how, like, I could be talking to one person, and then another person would come over, and then another, and then another, and there would be like 10 of us, and we were talking about, everything. Someone who'd been studying something, then acquired a disability, was having difficulty getting back into their profession. So there's a lot of peer support, role modeling going on. You didn't have to go to a room to have a particular discussion.
Yeah.
And so that to me was what was very exciting. But I also want to talk for a couple of minutes about the young people. So I think the youngest person you had there was like 4.
Yes.
She was amazing.
Yes.
So could you explain to us how younger people started getting involved? Was it consciously done or what?
Yeah. So we started this in 2012. In 2017, it was my first year where we're like, let's have kids. And I had no idea. Honestly, I had no idea what to expect. I mean, with kids comes parents, which comes like more people. And I was like, I don't really know what I'm getting myself into. So we invited kids that we had already met before. So we were familiar with them. And that was when we were still in, like, had it at dance studios. I was renting cars to go pick them up at the airport, to take them to an Airbnb that we rented, to then pick them up and take them to the dance studio. It was a lot. It was the year 2017. We had 30 girls. And the reason why we wanted to bring on kids is because we realized after a few abilities expos that kids would come up to us and their parents would say, hey, like, we'd love to like have our daughter come out and, do your camp. And I was like, oh, really? Okay. And it happened a few times. And I remember chatting with Bria, who's our COO of Rollettes. And I was like, what do you think about inviting kids? And she was like, that's a whole nother ball game. Like now you have to do kids classes. So anyways, long story short, we ended up inviting kids in 2017 and we had about 4 of them and their parents. And it was so cool to teach a dance class to kids and get to connect with them. That's when we realized like, wow, these little ones get to actually see real life role models in person. And that's when we were like, wow. And then in 2018, we opened it up to the public because my manager was like, open up to the public, see what happens. And I was like, okay. And 115 girls flew out that year from 12 countries. And that was when we were like, oh, this is real. Like this could be something big. So, but I do want to say 2 things. A lot of people think Rollettes Experience is just about dancing. And I love that you pointed out the fact that it's not, because yes, dancing is an activity, but there's so much more. And I have people that email us and they're like, well, I'm in my, 50s or I'm in my 60s and I want to come. And I'm like, please come, because for me, I have so much to learn from people who are older and wiser than I am. Like, and if I do, then other people do as well. I don't want Rollettes Experience to be for people in their 20s. I want it to be for all ages, because so many people can learn from the young kids or from people who are older. So that's what I want. And that's what I see for the future, is it being for all ages, because we want the activities to be for all ages.
And one of the things that I think about dance is that it's more than dance. The first day, there was a dance class for kids, the youngest, as we mentioned, being 4. And that was way beyond the dancing. And the instructor was amazing. She was so energetic. She was so vibrant. And this mother and her little girl came in, and the little girl wanted her mother to come with her into the cohort little group that she was going to be a part of. And the mother said no. And so the girl did not go into the group. She sat on the side. That was Friday morning. Saturday night at the closing event, this little girl was pushing herself all over the place. She was like the queen of the ball. And that transformation of being able to enter into a room with other disabled people who were, obviously she was the youngest there, but there were a number of other kids that were 6 or 7. And it was also great, Chelsie, to look at the young teenagers and how they were working with these younger kids. It was beautiful. And, some of the teenagers were actually helping the kids learn how to turn their wheelchairs around. But that weekend, as you can tell, everybody, I was just so blown away by it. And I never go any place anymore and spend like 3 days, but I was kind of all over this for 3 days. So as you look at this moving forward and wanting it to be even more intergenerational, what's your vision of how to make that happen?
It's a really good question. Like I said, I feel like every year I learn. But I think being able to bring in more outside people to help make that happen is, I think, the first step. I want it to be the place where if you are into one thing, then you can find it at Rollettes Experience. This coming year, 2023, we're already starting to talk about it. And I want to bring in outside people just to get another perspective, because I'm so focused on, what I enjoy, that I think having other people's opinions help broaden it, I think will really help. So it is something that the team and I are really talking about, of like, who can we bring in? What can we change? And we always send out every year after, we always send out like a type form where people can give us like their anonymous feedback on like what they would like to see, what they would do differently, what they didn't like, because we take that, and I love it because it always helps make it better.
What do you see as some of the major challenges that disabled people are facing today? And maybe we could focus specifically on disabled young women and women.
Through our mentorship program, Boundless Babe Society, one thing that I've heard a lot of is a lot of people my age are looking to get jobs. And I think that's where there's like this big halt, is when people with disabilities want to go get a job, it's harder for them. And I don't know, I to me, being in it, I'm like, why? Like, it's, I don't understand. But I think a lot of people are struggling with trying to figure out what they want to do. So I think that's like a big issue. But I also feel like something that has been coming up more and more is something we talked about at Rollettes Experience, and that's flying and airlines and our wheelchairs getting damaged, and
Right.
how to educate people around just taking care of our legs. This is the way that we get around. This is our device that can't be broken. So those are two things I think have really stood out to me the last year, is having people with disabilities find jobs and find careers through that, and then also having to educate airlines about how to handle our chairs.
I mean, I want to say on that point about employment, what I think is so important is when I looked at the people who were at the Rollettes 10th anniversary, you have this younger group of people that we were discussing.
Mm-hmm.
Their experiences are going to be different than your experiences, because you basically went through regular education with expectations as a non-disabled woman. The younger people, today, it's hopefully better for most of them in being in more inclusive educational settings. But another point that you raised earlier was when you acquired a disability, you didn't see yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's still very true. So these younger girls are still not really seeing themselves in careers. And I think, you've really hit on a very important aspect of potentially one thing that the Rollettes could be more consciously thinking about, which is how to help instill in younger disabled young girls and boys and their parents. Because I think what was very interesting when I talked to a number of the parents is some of them had been there before, some of them it was their first time, but the parents were there as much to expose their kids as it was to expose themselves. So I think that's a very vibrant part of the program. So you have really evolved since you acquired your disability. How long ago was that now? 13 years ago?
Yeah, almost 13. So 12 years. Yeah. It's crazy.
And so you are also someone that more and more people are learning about because of the good work that you're doing. And I think your ability to really express yourself in such a powerful way. And I think, your voice makes a difference in so many people's lives. So, learning about your being pregnant through People magazine, we were like laughing here about that. So where did you meet your husband?
So I actually met Jay at an abilities expo. Long story
Can
short,
you tell us what an
yeah.
abilities expo is?
Oh yeah. Yeah, so an Abilities Expo is a convention for people with all types of disabilities that you can go to and find literally every sort of resource you want, from sports to nonprofits to funding to wheelchairs to cushions to literally everything. It's like the mega place to go, and they have them all over the United States. So I was working for a company in the industry, and Jay worked for a company. And at the time, we caught eyes from across the room at the Abilities Expo in LA, and we didn't talk. And then I remember seeing him. He remembers seeing me, but we never said anything. And about 6 months later, we were at the same event, so Abilities Expo, but in Northern California. And he came over to my booth that I was working, and he said, "Hey, like, I'd love to hear about the product." And I did my spiel, like recognizing who he was, and I was like, he's really cute. So cute. And so, he always says, "Oh yeah, I already knew about the product." He actually sold the product for us. He was one of our vendors, and I had no idea. So we hit it off that weekend, and he asked me, to grab a drink later that night, and like asked me to breakfast the next morning, and we hit it off. And we've been together for 7 years now. We got married about 8 months ago, which was amazing. And Now we're expecting.
When is the baby due?
The baby's due in January. So we have a date of January 8th, but it's our first. So we don't know what can happen. I'm learning so much. I've been messaging girls from like all over that have had babies that do have, spinal cord injury. I'm like, what should I expect? How are things going to go later? So I'm about 18 weeks now. Crazy.
So what are some of your concerns, and what are some of the things you've been learning, and what are some of the things they may be teaching?
Yeah. So I've learned that, you got to pee a lot. So that like, real, like, I'll just be very open. Like, you got to pee a lot. You got to time yourself. I just recently learned that like towards the end, it does get a little bit difficult. The last few months, you have to pee like every 2 hours. And the last 2 weeks is like really hard. Blood thinners are something that, a lot of us have to be on during the full pregnancy. You can be on a baby aspirin, or you can be on like a shot. Let's see, what else have I learned? You definitely, the first trimester for me was really rough. I was very nauseous during planning Rollettes Experience, and I was very sleepy. So I rested a lot and I was very nauseous the whole time. So making sure that I eat consistently throughout the day is something that helps keep the nausea at bay. And second trimester is great. I feel like I got a burst of energy. But yeah, I'm just learning as I go. And I don't think there's enough talk about mothers with disabilities and what they go through. So I want to be as open as possible about what I'm going through. And really just help educate as many people. So a lot of people are asking me questions, and I just hope to be like another source of resource when it comes to that. I do have rods in my back, so I'm not sure if I can get an epidural now. So that's something that we're gonna figure out in the next few months is, will the anesthesiologist want to touch my back, or, do I do all natural, or do I do a C-section? Because you can do both. So there's a lot of things that my husband and I are talking about, and trying to get a birth plan, but also having a disability. It's kind of hard to have a birth plan because you just don't know.
So there's an organization in Northern California, I don't know if you've heard of it, called Through the Looking Glass.
Oh, I think I've heard of them.
Yeah, and so Through the Looking Glass was started in like the 1970s. It actually started at the Berkeley CIL, and now it's a separate group, but they work with parents who have disabilities. And I think, your point is really important. So non-disabled people having children, I mean, obviously it's the first experience, it's new for everybody, but I think you also are dealing with doctors who haven't necessarily worked with, women who have a spinal cord injury. And there are definitely other people out there who can help you and others. So I think it's great that you're on this journey.
Thank you. I also, what I've learned is so many people, my family was like, oh, so you get a spinal cord injury doctor. And I'm like, there's no such thing when it comes to delivering a baby, having a doctor that specializes in just one diagnosis. So you actually get a high risk doctor that has this like huge spectrum of what they see. So, someone with a heart condition, they'll also see them and somebody with a disability, or spinal cord injury, cerebral palsy. So it's all kind of grouped into one. So, really communicating with our doctors is something that I'm really starting to learn a lot about, because my doctor already was like, oh, well, we'll use, tools to, deliver the baby. And I'm like, I would love to have the option to not do that, so really advocating for yourself is something that I'm learning to do. It's hard for me to do sometimes, even though like I think people don't know that about me. It is hard for me to advocate for myself. I can advocate for others, but my husband and I are really just like sticking to what we feel we want to do, and then, going from there. But yeah, it's really interesting.
It is. And I'm sure that one outcome of this program today will be other people reaching out to us to let you have more information. And I'm sure, are you talking to Allie? I'm sure she'll, and she's going to have her baby before you. So, right? Oh my God, it's so amazing. Her baby is what, November, and you're January?
Yeah, she's sometime in November. I'm in January. So I'm gonna have all the questions. We text all the time. And I'm like, how are you feeling? She checks in with me. How are you feeling? And it's crazy because when I was feeling sick, she was feeling better. And she's like, it switches in second trimester. And then now I'm here and now she's telling me all the things to expect in the next 2 months. And I'm like, oh gosh.
So what are you looking at for the future as far as being a parent is concerned?
I'll be honest, I'm terrified. I'll be straight up honest with you guys. Like I'm terrified. I love the life that I've worked so hard to build for myself. And everyone says, "Oh, your life change, everything changes." And for me, the selfish part of me is like, I don't want it to change. But then the other side of me is really excited to take this next step and be a mother. And I just know that like for me, I just keep telling myself things are going to shift and it's going to shift in the most beautiful way. And so I think taking it each day, step at a time, is what's keeping me like sane because you can look at like, oh, baby shower, gender reveal, the nursery, all the equipment, like you can look at it as a whole. And then I get really overwhelmed. And then also running a business and doing what I do and my work through social media, it can be very overwhelming and I get a lot of anxiety about it. But what I'm really looking forward to is learning. Like I can't wait to be a mom. I can't wait to see Jay hold the baby. Like that I cannot wait like for Jay to be a dad. And we've been talking about this since we first met. So there's a lot I'm excited for. And I just want to keep myself very clear on what I'm excited for versus what I'm nervous for. And I think the nerves will come naturally. And I think every day I just learn how to advocate for myself, which is going to help me advocate for our baby later.
And I think, you definitely are an advocate, including for yourself. I mean, I have the same feeling that I can advocate for others, and I don't necessarily advocate for myself all the time the way I would like to. But I think that's because there are so many things that we see that we want to be different, and you can't dwell on each issue the same amount of time. You kind of have to pick, what you're going to go after. We like to end the program by asking people to tell us something about yourself that we may not have talked about that you think would be fun for other people to know.
Okay, so fun fact is something that like I don't think a lot of people know is if I wasn't a dancer and I wasn't doing what I'm doing today, I have this huge passion for interior design. I love interior design. I could look at magazines all day. It's like my guilty pleasure. Like I could go into any store and just get like absorbed into it by just designing different things. I'd probably design homes for a living if I wasn't doing what I'm doing now. So that's kind of like a fun fact I think about me that like is my own personal like hidden hobby that I love to do. I will always be redesigning our home, always. And my husband's like, why are you moving things around? I'm like, I don't know. I just want to. Like, I just get bored. So that's kind of like a hidden thing that I don't think a lot of people know is I love interior design.
I love that. I want to thank you so much for sharing your time and for everything that you do and you will continue to do. And we'll stay in touch about the baby.
Yes.
And you have two beautiful little dogs.
Yes, we do. Bailey and Stella.
So Jay, the husband, the
Yes.
two dogs, and the baby.
The baby. Yep. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Judy. Just having you at our virtual event in 2020 and then now in person, it's an honor for you to see what we've created, with everything you've done with Crib Camp and documentary and your book. I'm so thankful that you got to see it in person and got to know more people in the community. And hopefully we'll have you back next year and all the years to come. And I think you just brought such an amazing aspect of having to stick up for yourself and like advocating for yourself. And you taught so many people how to do that this year. So I appreciate you and thanks for giving me some time to chat.
History won't forget us or try to minimize our pain. And